everyone. I'm going to be giving you a lesson on how to write a letter to the editor. Letters to the editor start by reading. You are reading a news article and you would like to say something about that article. That article has inspired some sort of opinion or position or emotion in you, and you would like to let the newspaper or the author of that article know how you feel about it. So I'm going to start by reading an article that hit home for me, which was found in the education section of the Washington Post. I'm going to go through this article with you. I'm going to explain what a letter to the editor is and looks like, and then I'm going to write one of my own in preparation for you going through the same process. So this one is called 25 Years in Teaching, and this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, by Valerie Strauss, and it was published April 18th, earlier this month. Larry Ferlazzo, a veteran high school teacher in Sacramento, has been tweeting about his experiences teaching online during the coronavirus pandemic that shut down most schools in the country and sent kids to learn at home, and inviting other teachers to share theirs. He is finding a general meeting of the minds. Meaningful online teaching that began virtually overnight with little to no preparation or training is just plain hard. It is even harder, according to social media posts Ferlazzo has solicited, for teachers who have children at home who need their attention to help with their own schoolwork. And even worse, according to some teachers, for those who have no reliable internet access at home. For example, Cheryl Bost, a fourth grade teacher who is president of the Maryland State Education Association, said some teachers who live in remote areas are getting in their cars and driving to the parking lots of schools or libraries or even McDonald's to get internet access. One teacher has 2 kids of her own, and she's teaching in the car while her own 2 kids are doing their own lessons in the car too, she said. Ferlazzo has a large following on social media at Larry Ferlazzo and popular education blogs, which you can find here. Recently, Ferlazzo posted 2 tweets about how hard online teaching is in these circumstances, and here are some of the replies, which reflect reports across the country about the difficulties many teachers are now facing. We are barely making it. Husband is a principal, and our 2- and 5-year-olds do not care a lick about our full-time jobs. Haha, curriculum coach/teacher and husband to a principal here. Watching/teaching our 4- and 5-year-old kids feels like you're always neglecting something. Work, them, each other. We need grace right now. Teaching remotely is not easy. I feel like I've worked harder in the past few weeks than I have in years. Having gone from knowing exactly what to do each day to having to reinvent everything I do, getting kids and parents up to speed like a first-year teacher again, but in 2 weeks, not 40. I'm a very hard-working teacher when I'm physically in school. I feel like in some ways I'm working even harder with remote teaching. It feels nonstop. Our kids are out of the house, and I have absolutely no idea how teachers with kids at home are handling this. I would be at my wit's end. There's no doubt it is rough, but I don't think you could find a teacher who is going to give up on their own kids or their students. We're in this together for the long haul. And then somebody else responded to the same tweet by Larry, "Oh my gosh, it's endless. There is no escape." Somebody else replied, "I too have grown children. They are attending college online. I'm barely getting by. I have no idea how teachers with the young children are doing this." And Colleen Ludka replied, 100%. My wife and I are both high school teachers. We have twin 13-month-old sons. It's been wild. Fellow twin mama teacher here, a 4-year-old singleton and 2-year-old twins. 4-year-old on top of twins, I'll never complain again. So that was an article that I would like to write a letter to the editor for, because I can relate to this experience, but I also didn't really like the way that the author wrote that article. It just seemed like a lot of screenshots of tweets. So I want to present my opinion to the author after reading that article about how I felt. So some things that I need to know about letters to the editor. It is one of the most widely read sections, along with the opinion part of newspaper and online newspapers. A letter to the editor is a response to a previously published article. That is in juxtaposition to opinion pieces, which sound like the same thing, but those are just opinion articles about whatever topic you choose. So a letter to the editor is in response to somebody else's writing. A letter to the editor can inspire readers or writers to take action, and it makes your voice heard. Some tips for letters to the editor. You want to keep it brief, which means about 250 words or less. You want to get to the point, which means starting with a really interesting introductory sentence and then following the introduction with a short, clear, factual points. Don't make broad statements that you can't back up with facts. And if you need facts, then that's your job to use your researching skills in order to find them to back you up. Relate it to home. Newspaper readers care about issues that impact them personally. So make sure that you are relating it to whatever area you live in or the newspaper caters to so that your readers care. You want to personalize the issue, meaning that you want to provide an example of how the issue impacts a real person in the community, including you, to help readers understand the issue and encourage them to take action. You want to end with a call to action. Maybe the readers follow up. Maybe you want something out of the writer for the future. Be timely. Try to place letters when they'll be most effective. So, for example, if you saw an article about some piece of legislation that's coming up, then you want to get that out as soon as possible instead of waiting a couple years, in which case perhaps that law has already been enacted or wasn't signed and your letter doesn't make sense anymore. Be professional. So they should be typed or neatly handwritten and should follow the submission rules of the particular newspaper. Language should be polite but persuasive. You don't want to be mean and you definitely don't want to be crass. The newspaper will not publish your article if it includes things like expletives. And then identify yourself. Sign the letter personally and include any information in the letter that will tell how you exactly relate to the issue that you're talking about. So let's look at some examples and then we'll try writing our own. Thanks to Teresa Vargas for lifting the veil on the catastrophe brewing in the homes of people with intellectual disabilities throughout the city. And then she's naming the article that she got this information from, In a War Zone with DC's Most Vulnerable, which was in the Metro section on April 16th. As the mother of one of the people receiving supports from heroic and underpaid direct support professionals, I'm more aware than most of the inadequate supplies for people who must deliver up-close care. Having learned that medical-grade face masks are still unavailable, I have been making homemade ones for local DSPs and encouraging others to do so, in part to keep my mind off the incessant worry. Most difficult, though, is the silence about this dire situation in the mayor's news briefings, which tend to focus on the attention-grabbing headlines about larger settings, such as nursing homes, prisons, and St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Quieter but no less dangerous opportunities for viral transmission are created as DSPs venture out to run errands, provide care in more than one person's home, and go back and forth to their families at night. Family members are not receiving anything close to adequate information about the seriousness of the circumstances, nor is the wider public. With Ms. Vargas's column, I'm hopeful that will change. So here we see somebody who's read an article that they really identified with and liked, and then this whole letter to the editor is just in agreement and stressing the importance of this article that they read. All right, next. Paul Kane's April 16th at PK Capitol column, getting Congress back to regular order will be a complicated task, overlooked one significant factor. The roughly 2,000 dedicated employees of the architect of the Capitol, from which I am retired, who maintain and clean the buildings in which our nation's legislation is drafted, debated, and enacted. These talented employees work tirelessly to ensure continuous, uninterrupted operations 24/7, 365 days a year. They deserve a shout-out for their underappreciated efforts. So that's it. That's the whole letter here. So they read a column about Congress, and this person was upset that they didn't mention the people who maintain and clean those buildings. So they're kind of giving a correction to the article and saying, hey, you missed something really important here. While I despise President Trump as much as the next person, I was a little disturbed by the April 16th Tom Towles cartoon depicting the president's signature on death certificates. I love Mr. Towles' work, although it has seemed like all Mr. Trump all the time, but this cartoon was unfair. Again, that's it. That's the end of the letter to the editor, which is fine. They clearly have a problem with the cartoon, but they're also stressing, I don't usually have a problem with this cartoon, and just this one particular one was unfair for me. So giving a concession is a really good way to say, I'm a fair observer. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to write it. And I'm going to write a sample piece to the first article that I read to you all about how teachers were really struggling with this online learning. All right, my first line is, as a teacher, my heart went out to my colleagues in Valerie Strauss's April 18th article, 25 Years in Teaching, and this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Now, I chose this as my first line because it does a lot of the things we talked about in the tips. It identifies my own relationship to the article and why I am writing, why I'm an expert on the topic, and it refers to the article that I was talking about, which we saw in all of our examples. I empathize especially with the idea that we were given a few days or weeks to become a whole different kind of teacher. It feels like I'm a first-year teacher again, too. Here is that concession that I was talking about in the tips, where I am going to say that there are things that I liked about this article and that I related to, but I'm about to attack it next. And that again gives me just a little bit more credibility because it seems like I'm being a little bit more fair. Despite associating with the content, I would have appreciated a more in-depth, that should be reporting style, reporting style from Ms. Strauss. For example, one hurdle I've had to face is that the school is not paying for any online learning tools, and we're not allowed in our school building to get materials we've already purchased. Besides the demand on our time, the cost is another burden I'm sure many readers are not aware of. So here is where I am saying that the article missed something. I did not appreciate that she just copy and pasted a bunch of tweets, but she could have instead talked about other issues that teachers are facing besides the fact that they have kids at home. Why not spend more time investigating trends in teachers' challenges instead of screenshotting tweets? That should be shotting instead of shooting. It's always good to read over your work to make sure it says what you meant it to say. So here I'm leaving off with, okay, here's what you can do differently in the future. Instead of just taking pictures of things that you found online, why don't you ask people questions, which I think is your job as a reporter. So this is my finished piece again. It's short, it's to the point, just like the examples that we saw. Now I'm going to try and submit my letter to the newspaper. So to do that, I went to the menu on the Washington Post website. I found the letters to the editor section under opinions. At the very top of that page, it said in really tiny letters, submit a letter to the editor, which I clicked on, and then I got this page. We prefer letters that are fewer than 250 words, like I said before, and take as their starting point an article or other item appearing in the post. Again, like we just talked about. They may not have been submitted to, posted to, or published by any other media. They must include the writer's full name, anonymous letters, and letters written under pseudonyms, or like a very worried customer, something like that, will not be considered. For verification purposes, they must also include the writer's home address, email address, and daytime and evening phone numbers. Writers should disclose any personal or financial interest in the subject matter of their letters. After I submitted my letter to the editor that I just wrote with you all, I got a little receipt on my screen that said, thanks, your response has been recorded right there. And then I also got an email from the Washington Post saying, like, here are some things we expect, just so you know we receive a lot of them. Here are some things that we will look for. So that's helpful if I'm going to write another letter to the editor. And it's just proof that I submitted it, which is awesome. I'm throwing out my work to be published, which is a really cool thing. All right, and that's all I have for you on writing letters to the editor. Information will be posted on the next slides about your assignments and the debrief from what I just said. Hope you all are doing well. Bye.